Welcome back to the Let's Talk Civilly podcast. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. I am your host, Cleveland Horton, and I am joined today for this episode with my incredible, talented co-host, Gabi and Markyta. Welcome back, ladies.
The
Welcome back.
OGs.
We're back.
We are back, finally. I know everyone missed us, but we're back here.
Definitely.
Be careful what you ask for, everybody. So, in today's episode, we are truly going to be diving deep into the intersections of history, identity, and our fundamental civil rights. So, as we kick off this episode, I want to give a massive, joyful shout out to everyone celebrating Pride Month. And for us, when we think about Pride Month, I just want to send a message out to everybody. We see you. No matter who you are, no matter who you identify as, no matter who you love, we want you to know that we see you. Happy Pride Month, everybody.
Yes, happy Pride, everyone. It's such a vibrant time of the year. The sun's shining, summer's finally here. For any of our sports listeners, the Knicks won recently, so everyone's outside. The World Cup is here. It's just like we're here.
Wouldn't be Gabi without a sports plug, would it?
Exactly.
Right.
Got to talk to my people about it. Yes.
Some of the players are staying in Alexandria.
Yes, the Croatia team is staying there. That's where they're practicing on the field. I don't remember if it's what college they're practicing at, but yeah, it's Croatia who's staying near us.
Wow.
Yep.
Okay.
But back to Pride Month and connecting it to our focus of civil rights, remembering Pride and learning about Pride and knowing that it actually started as a riot and not a parade. So with that, Markyta, when we look at the calendar and see Pride Month and Juneteenth sharing the month of June, how do you see the intersection of these two massive milestones?
Yeah, I first want to say also happy Pride Month. I didn't get to say it. I remember working in the higher ed sector, and this was my main focus, was making sure that our LGBTQ students felt safe, they felt heard, and they felt seen throughout campus, and that their rights weren't being discriminated against on college grounds, right? So I love Pride Month. I think it's a joyful month. It's a time to celebrate, but it also can be extremely heavy. And when we see the intersections of our Black queer, especially the Black transgender community, the people that really kicked off what Pride, I don't want to say what Pride meant, but essentially how the riot started with Marcia and with Sylvia, and how their fears of being a woman of color, trans women of color,
Right.
And kicking off those riots and setting the stage. You see the intersections of, it's always been hard being a person of color, but then when you mix your identities, especially your oppressed identities,
So true.
it gets even harder.
Right.
And for some people, not saying that they don't have the grit or they don't have the stability to keep going, but the reality is we're human.
It's hard.
And when you have identities that intersect like that, it's hard to keep going. Then you also have the ones that are fierce, that are strong, and have the grit, and they're the ones that are standing up and fighting for what's right. So yeah, I would say that's probably how I see the intersections of June, and how the different identities, being Black and being in the LGBTQ community, kind of intertwine and what we're talking about today. For those of us that don't know, the Stonewall riots of 1969, they were back then in the 60s. Our police officers were really targeting the queer community and targeting gay bars that weren't necessarily out gay bars, but in the community, you know where to go. Like
Right.
you know where to go. You know where your people's at. That's just where you're gonna gravitate to. And in New York, there was an inn called Stonewall, and one night the police came in, raided the entire place, was putting people in handcuffs, was hurting people, endangering people, and the community basically said, "This is enough.
Right.
Like, this is enough. We need to put a stop to this." And the way that they put a stop to it was a 6-day protest. They didn't let up. Like I said, Marsha P. Johnson and Sylvia Rivera, they were two very head women in charge of these protests and of these riots. So Yeah, tribute to them.
Look
But
at Markyta dropping the history knowledge.
Mhm.
If I had one of those buttons, I'd push it right now, right?
ding,
Gives
ding,
you the
ding, ding,
noise.
ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, she knows her stuff.
Yeah, yeah. But I think back to you, Gabby. Why do you see it to be so critical that we do acknowledge kind of the blueprint and how things started and how we got to where we are and like how we can kind of use that blueprint?
I think, one thing that I know is that right now history is being just kind of hidden. Even with our current government right now, just making so many changes into what the youth is going to know about, or like how it's disseminated out. And so with that being said, it is important to hear things from other people and have other resources. Actually, funny enough, Markyta knows her gems, and she was the one who told me about, there is a documentary on Marsha P. Johnson called The Death and Life of Marsha P. Johnson on Netflix, if anyone wants to watch it. But she was the one who told me about it. And then it made me look more into about Pride Month. And then I found out that that happened in June
Yes.
of 1969, June 28th.
28th, I believe. Yeah.
Yep. And then a year after that, 1970, same date, they held a parade kind of to honor that. And they called it the Christopher Street Liberation Day March, which is recognized as in the U.S. as the first gay pride parade, which also kind of plays a part into why June is known as Pride Month. So again, kind of going in conversation with you, Markyta, of like, so you're able to know those things where, I'm learning things and having that open dialogue, which unfortunately is just kind of dwindling right now in like school systems. So again, learning more, like more different layers of history, I think is so important.
Yeah.
I think, one thing that I remember too about when I was growing up was, so when I was in college, I decided to take a lot of history classes. I think mainly because the teacher who was teaching it was just so great, so engaging, and I was having so much fun. But I was kind of comparing the information that I got like back in high school. And I felt like in high school was very much the way they were teaching me history was like villain and hero type of thing, versus like, no, that's not how it is. It's very complex. There's so many different layers. Like, I thought it was, they just didn't like what they did, and here they are retaliating and standing up for themselves, because I feel like that's how history's taught to us. But then really realizing, oh no, that's not really actually what happened, or seeing the other side of things. And I think that's so important too, to be able to have like a conversation around that.
Yeah, yeah. I know we're gonna get into voting later, y'all, but
Sure will.
just looking at history sometimes and seeing the pieces that they leave out that they're teaching the kids or they're teaching the youth,
Yes.
it's like they go straight to the winning picture.
Yes.
But then they forget to leave out like, well, no, actually, like 600 people had to march, and then that is what really enacted the Voting Rights Act, right? Or these many people had to die or were abused in order for June to be such a joyful month, because Stonewall riots is not something that like we cheer over, right? It's something we cheer over the ending aftermath. Like,
Right.
it brought us rights, it brought us the civil rights, but when we think about it, it's sad, right? It should make people want to cry. Like, wow, really, people were really getting hurt. People were really being locked up just for being who they are. And I feel like we see that all the time.
I think that's a good point, Markyta. I think when we think about just society as a whole, we tend to want to focus on the successes, right? And not really talk about, learn, research, and acknowledge the struggles that went into accomplishing those successes.
Yep.
Right? Because we know that progress in this country came with struggle, came with sacrifice, right? And when we think about how we accomplish the progress that we've made in our country and in our communities, we can't do that without talking about the struggles and the sacrifice, right? Those who were willing to speak up for other people, those who were willing to march in the streets, for us to have many of the civil rights that we have now. So as we think about where we are now as a community, it's important for us, to your point, Markyta, that we continue to talk about the history that allowed us to be in many of these moments that we're in right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, Markyta, building on that, how do shared roots of protests and civil disobedience connect to the fight for Black liberation with the fight of the LGBTQ plus community?
Yeah. So as we all know, this month is also Juneteenth. So the intersections of it all, I think
Shout out Juneteenth.
Yes, shout out Juneteenth. When we look at it, and I guess I can ask you all this question: how secure and safe do you feel in your body walking around the streets? Right? I feel like it's all about bodily autonomy, being who you want to be, but also having policies and the federal government there to keep you safe in doing so, right? Like, how am I supposed to be walking the streets or entering into a bar or booking a hotel and getting there, showing identification, and them looking at me like, oh, this isn't me, but oh, like you identify as X, but your ID says differently. So it's like really about bodily autonomy. How are we enacting policy and laws? Enacting is the key word, right? Because we can have policy and laws, but then we also see people aren't enforcing. So it's like, how are we enforcing to make people feel safe in who they are? And for some, when we look at Juneteenth, those are identities that they couldn't even choose themselves, right? And I think this is a great segue to go into Juneteenth and look a little bit closer at the what's the word I'm looking for? Liberation of America. I was like, what the word I'm looking for?
Markyta, that's a really great segment to get into our Juneteenth event here. With shifting our focus to Juneteenth, there's a massive public misconception that the Emancipation Proclamation instantly freed all enslaved people on January 1st, 1863. But we know that enslaved people in Galveston, Texas didn't get that news or their freedom until June 19th, 1865, 2.5 years later. Cleveland, from a historical and enforcement perspective, why do you think this massive delay happened, and what does that gap tell us?
I think that's a great question, Gabi. And I think, so when I think about this question, remember, obviously, back in those times, there was no social media, right? no way to pass information down in real time.
To go on live and
right?
like, we're
Go
free.
on live, right? No Facebook Live, no Instagram Live, no TikToks, right? So when we think about that, I think for me, the delay was intentional, right? So when we talk about a delay, I think a lot of folks talk about the fact that they didn't receive the message until 2 years later. But for me, it's more so they didn't want to receive the message, right? So when we think about the liberation of African Americans and blacks in this country, it's important for us to always think back to the Fannie Lou Hamer famous quote, right? That nobody is free until everybody is free. And as I was listening to Markyta's comments earlier about how safe do we feel, right?
Yeah.
We find ourselves in a climate now where we feel unsafe, where just taking your child to school is creating fear for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Fear that you'll be stopped, you'll be arrested, you'll be detained by ICE and deported to potentially even another country without anyone knowing.
Yeah.
So when we think about Juneteenth and the delay and the gap, it's important for us to recognize two things. That laws are meant to curb behavior, but laws can only do that with enforcement. And when you have a lack of enforcement, you have a lack of behavioral change.
Right.
So when we think about the Juneteenth and what it means and the delay and the gap, and for me, how that relates to where we are now, is that even though there was laws passed that freed the slaves, right? There was no compliance. There was no behavioral change in Texas until 2 years later. Fast forward to 2026, where we have this thing, this crazy idea called due process, right? It's on the books. You can read it. You can follow it, right? But there's no true enforcement around due process. When the folks who are charged with enforcing due process are the very ones who are violating due process.
Right.
So for me, it's important for us to just recognize that laws alone do not change behavior.
Right.
It's the accountability and the enforcement.
Yeah.
And that's why I think about the work that we do at the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights is so important, because it brings in the enforcement opportunity, the enforcement piece.
Right.
And every moment or every opportunity that we miss to do our job is another opportunity that we miss to change behavior. That's why I take the work that we do so seriously, because it's not just one case. It's not just one person.
Right.
It's not just one community. It is the policies. It is the behaviors that could have been rectified through the appropriate level of enforcement. And so for me, when I think about Juneteenth and the gap and the delay, a lot of that comes back to me in thinking about the context of looking at it in real time in 2026 and what that looks like. It truly just exemplifies when you have a lack of enforcement,
Yeah.
a lack of accountability, that you leave people to their own devices. And if we don't figure out sooner than later how to hold more people accountable, how to ensure that the enforcement mechanisms in place are being used in the appropriate manner,
Right.
then we'll continue to go down what I would consider to be this dark and divisive path that we find ourselves in right now, right? So to me, there are some direct parallels to Juneteenth
Right.
and 2026 right now,
Yeah.
when we see so many different things happening within our communities, right? So that's what I think of when I think about the delay and the gap and everything that was happening around Juneteenth and kind of where we are right now in 2026.
Yeah.
But one question I have for you all as we really think about and have this conversation around Juneteenth is, how does the history of Juneteenth remind us, and I talked about it a little bit, right? But how does it remind us that passing a law is only the very first step in the fight for true equity?
So with that, and it's funny because you were, speaking onto some things that I was like, I see that too. And there's another added layer of having like more people in the room too. That's so important, because then you're getting a diverse amount of people into these things, into rooms when they're making decisions. Because with policy, you can pass an anti-discrimination law tomorrow, but if the community doesn't know their rights or there are no regulatory bodies holding violators accountable, the status quo stays the same. And then even to that point too, it's like when you have more of a diverse population in the room, they're able to tell you, oh, well, that doesn't help our community, or this law or this policy is only helping that community. I remember from our last episode where we had Lieutenant Governor Aruna Miller here, and Cleveland was asking her about a bill that she had been speaking on behalf of, where it was talking about modernizing the language in our Maryland Constitution, about using gender-specific language in there. Because, again, it was just talking so much about men, and it wasn't including women. And she was like, I'm a woman. I'm in the I'm here. And so, again, where I was just talking about, like, having more people in the room. And even for our podcast, where we're all different in our own like identities, and being able to share that, like even back to your question, Markyta, that you asked, Cleveland shared his side of how he doesn't feel safe on certain things, and I can share the same thing on my end, where like now I have to walk around with my passport, because of ICE, because that's what's been going on. So I mean, luckily with Maryland, it's we have a good governor here who's trying to maintain safety, but at the same time, you just never know.
Yeah.
But it is one of those things where like may not be that for all communities or all different people, but like for mine and the Hispanic community, like that's a reality that we're living in right now.
Right. It's your lived reality.
Right.
It makes me think, I used to have a colleague at Coastal Carolina University. I actually sat in his interview and he said this, and it's always stuck with me because I feel like this is what everyone should be doing. He was interviewing for the director of orientation, and everyone knows orientation's really big. It's massive all summer long, and you get all walks of life that are coming into a university. And he was like, the way that I would approach my orientation, presentations, trainings, all the things, is always making it for first generation students. And someone was like, why do you say that? Because if you target for first generation students, you're not missing anyone in the crowd, right? Just because you may change the verbiage to be a little bit, more understanding or more inclusive, that doesn't mean that you are now secluding another community. No, it's just meaning that we're making it digestible for everyone, even if someone's sitting there like, well, why are they using this verbiage? Like, this doesn't even apply to me.
Right.
They're still getting the information that they need.
Exactly.
And ever since then, I was like, that's so smart. Not saying that I want to make everything into the 7th grade level of literacy, but to attract or for everyone to understand. But it still means like we can change our ways and we can make it a priority for a community, but it's still not secluding another community.
Yeah.
But we're actually building an umbrella.
It's funny because there's a little pet peeve of mine. I really don't like when people say it's not rocket science or it's really easy. That gets me a little bit because I'm always like, you don't know what's hard for somebody. To you, it might be common sense. And I get that. It's one of those things where, and I also think too, then, evaluating tone as well, because someone might just be saying that to make you feel a little bit more at ease or comfortable with it, and then trying to explain the process, which I get that.
Yeah.
But sometimes I'm like, well, it could it's maybe easy for you.
Yeah.
But for me, it could be something completely different.
Yeah.
And so I'm so big on like, I remember one of the people that trained me at MCCR, he would always be like, oh, it's not rocket science. And I'm like, okay, well, you're saying that after 10 years in the game at MCCR, I'm over here like, it's just not making sense to me.
Yeah.
And now you're even making me feel like, oh my gosh, like, am I really that, like, I can't understand this? So I think back to like, one of those things where like, I don't like saying that because I also feel like it's excluding in a way, you know, people who like think differently, me, I'm my neurodivergent, advocate. So I'm always like, they may not get it that way, but
well, I think that's a great point too that both of you made. And I think when we think about inclusivity, I always try to use the example of being invited to a party. So inclusivity is saying, well, including somebody is saying, hey, Gabi, Markyta, come to this party with me. Right. But being truly inclusive is saying, hey, Markyta and Gabi, now you're at the party, come dance with me. To me, that's what inclusivity is, because what we see happening a lot of times is when folks think about, hey, we're inclusive, we include everybody.
Right.
We bring people into the meetings, but you have them sit at a table. They may feel like the only one, so they're not participating. You don't acknowledge that. You don't figure out how to get them involved in the conversation.
Right.
To make sure that their ideas, their thoughts are included in the conversation.
Yeah.
So I think we have to take a look at inclusivity a little different. It's not just having people in the room. It's about making sure they're part of the conversation.
Yeah.
It's about making sure they feel comfortable that they are included and not just in the room because you're the only female, you're representing all females, or you're the only black person, or you're the only Hispanic, or whatever it may be.
Right.
But you're a part of the team. That's what inclusivity is all about. It's not just saying, hey, we're checking a box to make sure, oh, well, we had a diverse panel, but only 3 people out of the 4 spoke on the panel, right? That's not being inclusive. So for me, I think we all need to really think about and reflect around, when we talk about being inclusive, how inclusive are we really being when we talk about inclusivity?
Yeah, I just want to note that Cleveland invited the agency to a gala this past weekend, and he didn't ask any of us to dance. So,
and
how inclusive were you being, Cleveland?
he needs to take his own advice.
Right.
Well, then also plug right there. We are having our gala coming up.
Yes.
So, if Cleveland didn't invite you to this past gala to dance, you can ask again in September at our own gala. So you said something about a dance. So I should be expecting seeing all y'all on the dance floor at the hall.
Yes.
September 26th for our annual gala.
Tickets are on sale now.
Yep. Link in our bio.
Bring a friend or 2.
Yeah, make it fun.
Yep.
All right, well, back to Juneteenth and kind of moving forward with that. As legal advocates, Cleveland, how do we use the lesson of that 2.5-year gap to fuel the work we do right now at MCCR?
I think for us, it's truly about ensuring that we take our agency away from just being so office dependent. The work of the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights belongs in the community, listening to the community, hearing from the community. And I think that is a key priority for us right now, is how do we ensure that folks know that in order for us to be an enforcement agency, we have to understand what's happening in the community.
Right.
And in order for us to do that, we have to be in the community.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes, I feel like organizations, they sit up, in their, high-rise office buildings, and they just kind of throw stuff on the wall, kind of see what sticks, right? This is what we think the community wants.
Right.
One of our priorities really at the commission is really about how do we go down to the ground floor and go out into the community, listen to what the community needs, and then respond that way. Because in that way, we're providing a higher level of customer service to the community, because we're actually giving the community what they want and not what we think the community wants or needs.
Right.
But instead, we're being able to respond directly to what the community actually wants and needs. And I think that continues to be a significant priority for us, which is why I'm so happy to have the Let's Talk Civilly podcast, right, which is part of that priority in reference to how do we meet people where they are on different mediums like the podcast.
Right.
Or how do we create an aggressive education outreach component to the work that we do that embeds us out into the community. And that's different communities, whether it's the LGBTQ community, whether it's the disability community, whether it's the African American community, whether that's the Latino community. It really is having a diverse knowledge of all the issues that are impacting all of the diverse communities that make up our great state, and figuring out what do we do as the enforcement agency to address those issues. So I think for me, that's it. I think that's one of our major priorities, because I believe without listening to the communities, we're navigating blind.
Right.
Right. It's impossible for us to enforce civil rights without knowing what civil rights are being violated.
Yeah. Right.
And it's hard to understand that without, again, listening to the community.
Right. And I think, another thing that I can say that our agency is doing, especially, with Cleveland also pushing that as well, is, our commission initiated complaints. Our agency mainly takes complaints from the community. We're receiving them, but there are times where MCCR has just decided to step in themselves and investigate our own. So, I know with Cleveland, we've had a lot of more commission initiated complaints within, probably the last year or so.
We have. I just want to give a shout out to all of the enforcement staff, all of our investigative staff.
Yes.
We've issued more commission-initiated complaints since my appointment in 2024 than we've done in the last 20 years combined.
That's amazing.
And that's not Cleveland creating this space for us to do that, right? That is us really recognizing the power that we have as the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights and figuring out how do we be more engaged with the community?
Yeah.
How do we listen to the community more and respond actively? So instead of waiting for people to come to us with the issues, us being more proactive and going out in the community saying, hey, we heard about this issue. We are going to file on behalf of the state and move forward with our enforcement efforts.
Right.
And that is truly, for me, fundamental in developing and creating and sustaining a real trusting partnership with the community.
Right.
Because the community wants to know, above all, that you're going to show up. If you hear about an issue, you're going to show up.
Right.
If you know that there's something present in our communities, then you're going to use your enforcement tools to address that issue. I always say, win, lose, or draw, the important part about civil rights enforcement is the willingness to show up.
Yeah.
And that's what the public wants to see.
Right.
So that's what we are doing at the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights, is saying, if there's an issue, we're going to show up. So I always say, I feel like our staff, everybody's a superhero, right? We put these capes on and we show up, right? It's like somebody shines a light up in the sky, MCCR, right? And we show up, right?
Dibs on Spider-Man, by the way.
But that's when I really think about what we do. And I think that's the power in the work that we do, that folks know if there's a problem, the commission is going to show up.
Kind of with the commission-initiated complaints, and even, I know I'm going back in time of the topics that we've covered, but I remember there was one that we were looking at. I remember, Cleveland and I discussing it a while ago, where even us, we were just looking at the policy that this, agency had put out. Like, they put it out in the public, and we were looking at it like, I think this language is discriminatory. And so I think going back to looking at policies and procedures, and even then not being, who knows, I'm not, not want to say that I know everything or like whatever, but they might not have had the right people in that room when they were coming up with a draft of, their policies and procedures for their agency. But then when we're looking at it and it's like, well, that's actually not fair, or that doesn't include this group of people, or, it's discriminatory there. But again, that's where I think it's important also to look at policies and procedures, and just not question everything, but it is important, because even then, some people might be like, well, this big company put it out there, so I'm sure they did their research and, making sure that it was inclusive, but that's not always the case. And so even for our agency, being able to kind of catch that and being like, okay, let's, kind of go back and say, I think you need to change the language here.
Right. Especially within these past few years. Well, not past few years. Wow, it feels like it's been forever. This new administration.
Yeah, that's facts.
That's right.
But yeah, like we see the dismantling of DEI everywhere in corporations and in agencies. And that is the aftermath that you start to see. You start to see more of the ignorance and the discriminatory language in public releases or in policies or in maybe like their contracts that they're signing with their staffers, because they don't have the unit there that is supposed to be sponging through all of that and making sure that the infrastructure that they're building is inclusive, is diverse, and that they're creating a culture of peace and, again, to our bodily autonomy and feeling safe in the places that we're in, right? All of that matters.
Yeah.
Well, again, Markyta, that was a great segment or a great leading into our conversation on voting. I know Cleveland's got a lot to say about voting. We got a lot of thoughts about that one. It's been a huge thing going on right now.
Yeah, we have, well, from today that we are recording, not necessarily the day that we're releasing this, but we only have like about a week. It was June 23rd, right? June 23rd is ours for Maryland.
Well, early voting is going on
June 11th
right
to the
now.
18th.
Yeah.
I actually voted on Sunday.
Oh, nice.
Yep.
Well, that's good. See, didn't know that they were open on Sundays.
Yep.
Oh, yeah, Saturdays and Sundays. I think from
They
like
open
7
up
a.m.
every day. I
to
think
8
7
p.m.
a.m. to 8 p.m. every day.
Okay.
Yep. Go vote.
I was going to say, good pitch. Go
Go vote.
online. Literally, just type into Google, where can I vote? What are the voting hours? Can I see an example of what my ballot will look like living in, example, I live in Anne Arundel County. I was just looking at mine last week and just seeing who's on there, doing your research with every single person that's on there. I know it may seem strenuous, and we're going to get into it a little bit more, but this matters so much. We put so much emphasis on our 4-year presidential election, where I feel like we don't put the same emphasis on this election when we should, because these are the people that are deciding a lot for our children, a lot what's going into the schools, our underrepresented kids that may need a lunch that are no longer getting that free lunch, and now they're sitting in class with their bellies hungry and they're not able to learn. The list goes on. Your roads, y'all want the roads fixed? Go vote. These are the people that are going to be making those changes and that are going to be able to enforce the policies and laws that you want to see in your state and in your counties.
No, I agree.
Well, for our listeners, Markyta, I mean, you gave
Yeah.
But for people who hear the term, the decimation of the Voting Rights Act, what does that actually look like in practice across the country right now? I mean, you touched on it, but
I did. A little chaotic, but before I answer this, because when I was doing research on voting, Cleveland's definitely the expert to our listeners when it comes to voting, but we got to look at history, and I feel as though history, and I hate to say it, I feel like history is kind of repeating itself. After I was looking at just a little bit of our timeline, back in this was like before the Civil Rights Act, when Mississippi was able to basically skirt the 15th Amendment, and basically disenfranchise Black voters. They started that, and guess what everyone in the South started doing? Same thing. Texas, Arkansas, right? They just followed suit. And then we see after the Civil Rights Act in 1964, a little less than a year later, we have Bloody Sunday. And for our listeners that don't know what Bloody Sunday is, there was hundreds of Black Americans marching to Selma, and once they got to the bridge, there were hundreds of white troopers waiting there to beat on them, to put them in handcuffs, to essentially kill them, right? Because they were marching for their right to vote. We saw civil rights, where that's what we protect now, the discrimination against race, sex, sexual orientation didn't come until a little bit later. But we got that in 1964, and then in 1965 they were like, okay, now where's our right to vote? And then the beatings, again, going back to the Stonewall riots, it had to take beatings and it had to take sacrifice for them to be like, wow, that's bad. Y'all want it that bad? Voting Rights Act right after that, right? So it's sad to see, yes, we got the aftermath of the Voting Rights Act, but at what cost did we get it?
That's why I say it's always important. I know we talked about it earlier on in the podcast about when we recognize certain laws or what some people will consider to be successes, it's always important to understand the history behind it, right? So shout out to the late Congressman John Lewis, who obviously was one of the marchers at the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama. And it's important to recognize that those group of individuals, when they got to that bridge, that was their moment.
Yeah.
They had a decision. It was, do we walk across this bridge into what we know will be violent, could be life-changing, or do we turn around and go back? And all of them decided at that moment that the risk of losing a life, getting beaten was not more important than standing up for individuals.
The risk was worth the reward.
Yes, right? And they continued on that bridge, knowing what was in front of them. So just imagine, many of us, right, we live in communities now with a lot of privileges and benefits based off of the sacrifices that were made by people like Congressman John Lewis, individuals that remain nameless who were also on that bridge. That we now have a right to vote, and that many of us take that right for granted, right? We'll hear many folks talk about, I don't like any of the candidates, so I'm not voting, right? And I think a lot of folks, when you make these comments, while I'm not picking anyone in particular, but it's just, you also have to understand what folks went through just for you to get the right to go into that booth and pull that lever.
Yep.
Right? And be able to select somebody. Right? And it's important for us when we think about voting to recognize that voting is not just a symbolic gesture. Voting is a right that was given to you because of the sacrifice, the blood, just the beatings of individuals who wanted you to have something that they didn't have. And I think when you think about it in that context, I tell people there shouldn't be a choice to vote. It is, you have to go vote.
Yeah.
Right? And I think as we continue to talk about what's happening now with the desecration of Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, what people would consider to be just the complete dilution of the Voting Rights Act, we all should be up in arms, not just black people, right? But white people. Everybody should be up in arms about what the Voting Rights Act symbolizes, what it means, to ensure that we all have accurate representation when we think about what this looks like. So, voting rights is as important to Cleveland as it should be to Gabi, as it should be to Markyta, as it should be to everybody that is listening to this podcast.
Yeah. Going back to Shelby, your question, Gabi, is chaotic, and I brought up history because I feel like we're seeing that repeat. Basically, states needed federal approval to either change or implement different laws when it came to voting, right? And that's like rezoning and redistricting and things of that nature. Well, now, and that was once called pre-clearance. They need that pre-clearance. Now that's out the door. The Supreme Court struck that down, and we're now seeing where states are able to, I don't want to say necessarily do what they want, but they don't need to follow federal regulations when it comes to that. So, I mean, it's a chaotic time. it's going to be interesting just seeing like polling places as well, especially in minority neighborhoods. Right? We can talk about gerrymandering,
Right.
the difference between racial gerrymandering versus, excuse me, versus our, what's the word that I'm looking for? Partisan gerrymandering, right?
Big
So
words, big words.
very big words. But we are seeing when people go into neighborhoods or counties or whatever, and they are creating the map of voting zoning, you're now seeing, instead of a square or a rectangle, you're seeing like horseshoes, and you're seeing things that just look crazy. But they're doing this in again, the word that I'm looking for. They're they're doing this for their benefit, right? So racial gerrymandering, you're seeing that pushing or making the black vote less than, and you're seeing this in that redistricting. So very interesting years. Like I said, I feel like we've been under this new administration for longer. It just feels very, very long. But yeah.
Well, Cleveland, Maryland is traditionally viewed as a progressive blue state. What is Maryland doing to actively acknowledge these national threats and fortify our own state level voting rights?
That's a great question, Gabi. I think as I think about it, I do want to uplift the Moore Miller administration. I think they've been very active in ensuring that Maryland really steps up as a shield to some of these things.
Yeah.
But I also think it's important to recognize too that when we talk about Maryland, Maryland is considered the northernmost southern state too.
Yeah.
But I think when we think about our legislation and what some of the things that have been pushed forward, we got to talk about things like the Maryland Voting Rights Act, which is really our attempt to establish our own state level protections against voter delusion and discrimination. And that's important. I think, obviously our governor and our lieutenant governor have been out front talking about we need to do whatever we can to protect voting rights and voters in general. And that's important. So even though we are, for me, it's not about being a blue state or a red state. For me, I always say it's about being a human state. And we have a responsibility to protect humanity. And within that humanity, we have an obligation to protect the rights of voters and voters when they are attempting to cast their vote and do what is their right, which is to vote. And I think that's important. So, we see the confrontations at polling places. We see the disagreements at polling places, and just trying to create an environment that is less hostile, right? I always try to liken our environment now to, I remember when George Bush was running for president. I remember that was a campaign that was like vote or die. If you vote for George Bush, and if you don't vote and George Bush wins, you're going to die. I remember that campaign, but it was just a campaign slogan. You didn't have the hostility within the communities. You didn't have, if you voted for George Bush, then you were just marked as this, or if you didn't, you were marked as something else. And now we find ourselves in an environment where you are being judged by whether you're a Democrat or you're a Republican. And I don't think that it's right on either side. I think that individuals have a right to choose their particular political affiliation. They have a right to do that. And they should have the right to do that without fear of retaliation, without fear of hostility, without fear of confrontation. And I think for me, and when I think about where we are just as a country and in many communities, we've lost our humanity. We've lost our ability to be different and respect our differences. And I think that it is a very vital point. Now, obviously, I don't support any type of ideology that divides people, that separates people, that excludes people. And it is my hope that the more that we all get more educated, we can create more inclusive policies, more inclusive laws, and get back to a state. And when I say state, not meaning state as in Maryland, but state as a whole, we can get back to a point where we value each other's differences, where you may not look like me, but you bleed like me. You may not love like I love, but your heart beats just like my heart beats. And those are the connections that we all share. And we all know that it is our differences that make us stronger. It is our differences that makes America the place that it is. When you think about the fact that many individuals go through hella high water to get here, right? Risking their lives just for the opportunity to step on American soil for what we've considered to be the American dream.
Yeah.
That we've got to think about not who we are, because we know who we are and we also know who we've been. But this is our moment to determine who we will become.
These are bars.
Yeah.
I was just thinking that. I was like, okay, put it in a bio or something.
Right. I'm like,
Sheesh.
Cleveland, are you making a song?
I was like, okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Well, Markyta, I know you had touched on it a little bit, but, just kind of going back and giving that some focus. How does voter ID intimidation or lack of poll worker training specifically harm transgender voters whose ID photo, name, or gender marker might not perfectly align with their current presentation?
Yeah, it's a massive barrier, Gabby. And I think of the work that we do at the commission. Public accommodations is something that we protect, right? And our voting polls is a public area where the public should be served with the same rights that we protect and that they have. So like just going back to, I think I gave this scenario already, but imagining going up to a voting poll, having the right to vote, having the right to be in the skin that you have and the identities that you've chosen, and handing over your ID, and your ID says male, but you present as female, right? Your picture may look differently or whatever the case may be. And now this person's looking down at it, looking up at you like, this says that you're a male. Why do you look female? And like you're surrounded around your community, around your neighbors, and just the lack of education that people have. Going back to the word ignorance, because it's not necessarily a negative connotation, but just not knowing. People don't know. People don't understand what they don't understand, their differences. Going back to what Cleveland was saying, like we're all human, and sometimes when you live your own lived experience, you can't see others and how they may be living. So I mean, it's a huge barrier. Or we even look at, because disability is heavy on our caseload, and we can look at that at voting places too, right? Like, are there ramps available? Do people need to only use stairs? Are the elevators working in these places? Are they accessible for people to even get into? And looking at all of that and seeing, like, if that's the case, let's just say my grandmother that literally was just in the hospital last week for her blood's not moving through her legs correctly because of her veins. 89-year-old woman wants to go vote because that's what she's been doing year after year. But when she gets there, she sees like, I need to go upstairs, I need to go up a flight, I need to turn a corner. She can't get there. So what does she do? She turns around, and now she can't even express her right to vote. So yeah, I feel like we see that more often in spaces like this. I mean, we see it in public spaces all the time. And we just need to be a little bit more cognizant and do a little bit more training with our volunteers.
Yes.
And I understand that they're volunteers and we appreciate them volunteering, right? Yeah. It's a heavy load. We just said they're open 7 days a week, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. And they are open from the 11th to the 18th, and then again on the 23rd. Like that's a lot. And we appreciate our volunteers. However, when I say we, I'm saying the people that are overseeing the voting polls, they need to do their due diligence.
Yes, I definitely agree. It's funny because I had that as a thought as well to touch on today with voting. I think like the importance of having people who are proactive and trying to be as positive as they can. I know it's a lot to ask. I always say it's hard to ask for patience for others when we sometimes even having patience for ourselves is hard. But then not even just having patience, you have to have, and I always say it for people who have families. I'm always like, not only do you have to have patience for yourself, then you have to have patience for your husband or wife, and then you have to have patience for your kids, and then you're expected to go to work and have patience for coworkers. Like that's a lot,
Yeah.
And so now I'm over here like, so poll people, please have patience for these strangers.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like it is such an important thing
It is.
because of, lack of resources in that certain area. And then, somebody may need, extra help with it. And then if they feel as though they're being a burden, it does turn people off. I'm sure someone's probably been like, I'm not going to a voting place again. Like last time I tried to ask them, if they had a ramp so I can get in, they looked at me like I was, wild for asking that type of thing. And, that turns people off to want to go out there and vote. So I definitely do think that having the voting staff being able to be proactive and having patience is so important.
Yeah. Off of that, really quick plug for us, education and outreach, we provide trainings, right? Like, so for everyone that's listening, if you are volunteering or if you know the people that may be overseeing these polling places, we offer free training to our Maryland agencies or any Maryland organization. So feel free to go onto our website, MCCR.maryland.gov, look under education and outreach. We do sexual orientation training. We do religious accommodation, public accommodation. So just look at our catalogs.
Use us.
Yeah, see what could be relevant in this time. And I know voting is going on right now, but
it's going to happen again.
Right, exactly. Voting's going to happen again. So reach out to us. Utilize your resources that we have set here in Maryland.
Well, Cleveland, how can voters report these public accommodation issues if they experience them on Election Day?
That's a great question, Gabi. I think Markyta touched on it too a little bit. Contact us at the Maryland Commission on Civil Rights. We do want to make sure that if folks are being denied access or not giving the ability or assistance to cast their vote, that they do reach out to us and see what assistance we can provide to them. There's also an election protection hotline that folks can reach out to as well and submit any complaints or whatever that they have the day of voting. But I think more importantly, I just want to emphasize, contact somebody. Let somebody know what your experience was so that an organization or an agency has the ability to follow up. The more people follow up, the more we can respond and ensure that doesn't happen again.
Markyta, I know you were talking about, local government and how that's, voting for our local officials and what that means. You want to touch on that again?
Let's just shift our audience to some knowledge that will benefit them during this process. So for everyone out there that may not know where to go, or you feel lost, or you're like, this is very overwhelming, voting can be kind of overwhelming, we just encourage you to go on Google, type in your questions, type in, where is my voting place if I live in X, Y, and Z? Can I see a sample ballot of what I'll be walking into? And I promise you, something will come up and you will get your answers. Maryland has an amazing website for you to look at what county you're in, and they'll give you your sample ballot. I encourage you to go on there, research every candidate on there, and choose what fits your values, what you look forward to, the life that you want to live here in Maryland. So we just want to encourage you all to do just that, and we can take it home, y'all.
Okay, well, so I will go ahead and plug in some pieces before I let Cleveland finish us off. But we had a really good conversation today. We talked about Pride Month, we talked about Juneteenth, and we talked about voting. A whole bunch of things happening this month of June. So I know it's just great weather outside, but also having to remember things they're very important. So I'm glad that we had that conversation. We touched on our gala. So putting that in as well, that's coming up.
Cleveland needs to dance with you.
With you. He had asked about dancing with you. Yes. But if you want to catch us dancing, please join us at our gala. It is going to be September 26th, 2026. We are going to be at the hall again. So our tickets are on sale right now. Early bird tickets are on sales right now. You can find the link in our bio. We have it on our Instagram page, on our Facebook. We have it on all our socials. We've sent out emails as well about it. So that's really what we're focusing on for the next, for this summer. You'll hear a lot about our gala. But with that being said as well, another part for our agency, if you or someone you know may have been discriminated against in employment, housing, public accommodation, health services, please visit us on our website at mccr.maryland.gov, and you can file a complaint with us there. Or if you need to give us a call at the agency to get paper complaint forms, because we do know that not everyone has access to the computer, we can mail out the complaint forms to you. So you can give us a call, or you can go online and file a complaint with our agency, and we'd be more than happy to help and talk.
Oh, thanks, Gabi. I think as I think about our conversation today, to me, the key word that stands out is freedom.
Mm-hmm.
And then we think about, to paraphrase the quote from Coretta Scott King, and she talked about the fact that freedom is not a given.
Right.
Freedom must be fought for in every generation. And I think when we think about everything that is happening within our communities right now, this is our moment to fight for freedom. This is our moment to fight for the country that we want to see, not the country that we know the history of, not the country that we see in present day, but the country that we want our nieces, our nephews, our little brothers, our little sisters, our grandchildren to be able to inherit. We want to be able to fight for the freedom that maybe some of us don't have right now. So it's important for us to utilize this moment and recognize that there is going to come a time when individuals are going to look back and they're going to want to know, what did we do to stand in the gap in this moment? Not for ourselves, but for what I would say the key word, which is how did we stand in the gap for freedom?
Right.
So I do appreciate the great conversation and perspectives that we had today. But I want to urge everybody to remain engaged, involved, and participate.
Yeah.
Participation is not sitting on the sidelines talking about the bad decisions that were made by other people. Participation is actively going out and voting, utilizing what your right is, helping change policy, helping engage in conversations to change decisions. So I always say, for me, we learn from yesterday, right? We follow today, and then in the end, we'll be able to lead tomorrow.
Yeah, I know.
Bar.
Per usual.
Well, thank y'all. In the meantime, continue to build community, continue to educate yourselves, and continue to talk civilly. And we'll see y'all next time.
See ya.
Bye.